unless I'm gravely mistaken about this, and I have been gravely mistaken about a lot of things today, let alone in my whole life, I believe this is our 10th episode of Swedenborgian Life, and I want to say thanks to all of you, because if you guys weren't enjoying this, we wouldn't be doing it on a regular basis. So it's been really cool having all of you there. That said, we have a lot of good things to make this 10th episode the best one ever, to talk about how quickly after death we make our way to heaven and hell. We're going to discuss that, heaven or hell. Will our friends from Earth recognize us in the afterlife? And we're going to get to the reunions of married couples. And if this 10th episode is your first episode, you're probably saying, how could they ever know those things? And the answer is, Swedenborg said. So we'll be looking through and grabbing that. But I'm not going to be alone. Who am I? Curtis Childs with the Swedenborg Foundation, who is a nonprofit that translates, publishes Swedenborg's books, tries to get his ideas out there. And part of that team that translates Swedenborg is the esteemed Chara Daum, and she is here with us today. Hi, Chara. Thanks for being on the show.
Hey, Curtis. Glad to be here.
Really glad to have you. Chara is cool, and one of the coolest things is that, Swedenborg wrote in Latin. He didn't write these books in English, and Chara can speak, or at least write, that language. So she kind of can give us access to the what's behind this material that we're seeing here, and maybe a little Latin poetry a little bit later on. Let's see. You guys can download the English version and follow along. There's a link that we have here. It's in the description. That's where you're really going to get it if you're watching this in post. Just click that thing right now, and that should get you guys set. But we're not really set until we have our minds in a good space. And as Swedenborg describes it, the subconscious is heaven and hell. I mean, there is this influence from the positive and the negative on us all the time. So the more that we can kind of tune our mind away from the negative frequencies and toward the positive, the better we can live and also absorb information. So if we're going to watch this show, we want to try to tune our minds the right way. So let's start with what we could tune out. And so, Chara, Swedenborg kind of describes heaven and hell essentially as sort of a mindset. So what is the hell mindset as you understand it from Swedenborg's work?
I would say that he describes it as excessive concern with self and the material world, just to the exclusion of other loves that make us happier, which is other people, love of God, things like that.
Yeah, and putting those things ahead of everything, as in, well, if I got to step on a few people to get what I want, then that's what I'm going to do, because we got these loves, Swedenborg likes to talk about loves as things all the time, and he talks about, okay, the loves of self, loves of the world. If those are your top of your totem pole, then you may have a little hell in the mind. So let's get that out of there, and let's look toward the heavenly mindset. And what is the heavenly mindset as you understand it?
The heavenly mindset, I would say, is loving some other people, taking care of other people, wanting to make a difference in the world, wanting to help people out, following God's plan for your life.
Yeah, and I like wanting to help out is a great point, because he talks about part of the heavenly mindset is the desire to be useful, right? And that if we come at this information with a desire that, hey, we want this to have impact on life, we want to make it so we can somehow help other people with what we're gaining here, then we're in great shape. So, all right, thanks for that. Hopefully our brains are now organized and ready to receive. And let's take a look at the material now. We're going to open up our PDF or ebook, whichever you've downloaded, or maybe you have the real thing with you. We've skipped ahead. We've never done this, but as I said, this is our 10th episode, so we're just trying some new things. We've skipped ahead to page 59, you can see, to the chapter, Our First State After Death, and you're definitely welcome to read the intervening material that we haven't covered on this show. But here we are, and let's make the most of it. Our first state after death. There are 3 states of being that we pass through after death, before we arrive in either heaven or hell. And I feel like I always have to stop, because he begins a lot of chapters, and Chara, the first episode of this show I had this whole issue, because when you see heaven or hell, Swedenborg describes them significantly differently than sort of the traditional, that heaven is a reward for good behavior and hell is punishment by God for your evil. So when he's talking about heaven and hell, there's a whole other dynamic there. Do you want to say a few things about the differences between Swedenborg's hell and heaven and sort of the traditional hell and heaven, as many people have heard of them?
Yes, I'm not sure I'm an expert on the traditional views, but
Right.
Swedenborg describes it as very similar to this world in many ways. We're going to have the experience of having a body, of interacting with people, of having houses, going to work, having fun with our friends. But it's also a state of mind that we can, even while we're on this world, we can access those states of mind that are looking towards others and joyful and that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I will have two thoughts on that. First is that what I would do if someone asked me a question and I wasn't an expert in something is I would just pretend. And that's like a little broadcast tip for you. But second of all, there's these similarities, and that hell is not this like completely different world where it's pure torture all the time. It's much like a dysfunctional, self-centered life in this world, and the consequences that we go through based on the harm that we cause. And also part of Swedenborg's hell is you have to be around other people who are like you, and which is a scary prospect. Anyway, for our audience, there are the first episode of this show, other episodes we talk about this. There's much more to be said, but we'll just keep rolling through the text here. But I just feel like I want to put a little asterisk there so people don't think like, oh, he's just saying, yep, it's either you come, they see which, if you got an A or an F, and then you're tortured or you're put in happiness forever, because it ain't like that as described by Swedenborg. So let's get back to our PDF here. In the first state, we focus on our outer self. In the second, we focus on our inner self. In the third, we focus on our preparation. The world of spirits is where we go through these states of being. And the world of spirits, Swedenborg described as being, this midway point that everybody enters once they've passed out of this life. That said, some people don't go through these states at all, but are either raised into heaven or cast into hell immediately after their death. And again, let's just do this exact same thing we did last time. Cast into hell. As Swedenborg describes it, who casts people into hell?
I would say that people cast themselves into hell, and it's actually that they can't resist, because people go where they're as free as possible to love what they want to do. And if what you want to do is harmful to other people, then you'll be in a different place than if what you want to do is help other people.
Yeah, that's very well said. And that it's can't resist is a good thing to put. That's you're like, oh, this is my scene, and that believe it or not, that is the way people are headed. If that's the motor that drives people into hell. It's not God saying, I don't want you anymore. So just feel like we gotta in case this is somebody's first time, we gotta tell them about that.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's get back to our PDF situation here. The people immediately raised into heaven are ones who were regenerated, whose regeneration prepares them for heaven while they were in this world. And regeneration, as Swedenborg describes it, we would call now maybe spiritual growth, personal growth. This is the process where we are opening, facing away from selfishness and materialism, these kinds of things, and looking to God, love of other people, humility. So that's the process that we're kind of going through in this world. People who have been prepared in this way only have to cast off the stain of their material being as they shed their bodies, and angels immediately take them into heaven. I have seen people raised up to heaven an hour after their death. So what he's saying here is that we're all going through a process, and the process is what he calls regeneration, or we go from being self-centered to caring about the human race. That's the basics of it. And if we can do our homework and do that well, we're ready to launch immediately, once we leave. So maybe a little extra incentive to get the work done now. I've had people that I've heard asking, yeah, how long after somebody dies or before they're in the heaven state or the hell state, and as he describes before, it has a lot to do with how much are we externally like we are internally, right? Have you heard of that, Cara?
Absolutely. I think people progress at different rates, and it is a matter of finding out who you totally are, who your whole self is. And that's a process that takes gradual, it's a purification process that takes a while. And you try different things out, you go visit different people, and you figure out who you are.
Yeah.
You're not sent anywhere before it's clear that you're all one way, as it were.
Yeah. Was that I just gotta be me?
Yeah.
Once that happens,
I gotta be me.
yeah. Audience, we're gonna sing all the way through whatever old timey song that is. I just know that one line from it. But that genuineness is the goal of the world of spirits. That it doesn't, if somebody loves what is harmful to other people, nobody can force them to not love that. I mean, this is that freedom thing that it talks about. However, what you can't do in the other life, you can love anything you want, you're totally free, but what you can't do is pretend to be something that you're not. There's a huge importance placed on that. So let's get back to our text, continue reading through. On the other hand, people whose inner character is malicious, but whose outer appearance is virtuous, people who fed their malice on fraud to the bursting, and who use goodness as no more than a tool to deceive others, they are cast directly into hell. I have seen this happen to people. One of the most deceitful went head first. For others, there are other ways of falling. And that last sentence is, it's not a funny topic. Somebody's jumping into hell, but the way that he says it, like there were other ways of falling as well. That he's obviously seen things and is just trying to write it all out. But as we were saying before, cast into hell. The head, he just talks about those head first people, and that's because you just like, I gotta get there, because that's where I'm allowed to. Yeah, if you harbor these malicious feelings towards your fellow human beings and want to act on them, that's where you can do it. You feel claustrophobic in heaven because you aren't allowed to try your schemes on.
Yeah.
Agreed. And if I say anything that is just absolutely untrue, you got to stand up for Swedenborg and cut me down here, because if nobody stands up to me, I'm just going to be like, oh, I'm doing such a great job.
Well, I do have a thought about that, and that is that Swedenborg talks about that in the spiritual world we go to where we can breathe. So it's just a matter of where the atmosphere works with our spiritual lungs. And I think of it too as a sort of a magnetism, like whatever we love is drawing us, the real us. So I think of love as magnetism. I don't know if that's accurate, but
yeah, I think that is definitely accurate in Swedenborg's descriptions of the afterlife, that thought and affinity actually bring people closer together. Thought creates presence, and communities are actually organized based on what do people love. And people who have loved similar things organize communities even more so than in this world. I think that's legit. And you bring up an interesting point, breathing, and the sort of fusion of mind and body, or spiritual body that goes on there, that actually if you're in a space like that Swedenborg says thought and breathing are connected, and there if you're actually in a sphere of people who think incompatibly with you, you actually have a hard time breathing. So there's kind of this fusion there, which I find fascinating.
Absolutely.
Good. All right, so we're in agreement. It's fascinating. Let's take a look at the PDF again. There are also people who are sent off into caves right after their death, and are in this way segregated from people in the world of spirits. They are alternately brought out and sent back in. These are people who have treated their neighbors maliciously while pretending to behave civilly toward them. So it almost seems sort of like a quarantine that he's describing here. That there are these caves, so that because if you're in the habit of I'm pretending I'm nice, but I've got it out for you, then you aren't given access to all the new people coming into the afterlife, because you're going to try try something on them. Okay, the very good and very evil people are few. So these people that skip the spiritual world step are few, though, compared to the number of people who are kept in the world of spirits and prepared there for either heaven or hell, according to the divine plan. So I didn't mention this earlier. I'm going to mention it now when it's too late. You guys can, right now, Cara and I are discussing, but we'd love to hear what you guys think too, and hear your comments, your questions, because I do like the human race, and I think that we all have good things to say, and the more we can get stuff from you, that's great. So just leave a comment on the YouTube comment section, or if you found us on Facebook, you can leave a comment back there. We'll find it and we'll try to get it in. For now, let's see what sort of we'll go to a few now and do our best, and then you guys can. But we'll have other segments during the show of questions. So if you get those in later, we'll get to them later. All right. So this is our first one for today. It's from YouTube. Jim Smith. If you have two ex-husbands, which one will you recognize? And I would say that's a great question for today, because it wasn't one of our topics, reunions in the other world of married partners specifically. And I don't know if this is where he describes it, but Cara, do you remember where he talks about if somebody, that married partner, we re-meet with people we've had relationships with in the world, family members, etc. But married partners will also meet each other. And if somebody had multiple partners, you sort of spend a little time with each of them and kind of sort through who did you really have a deep connection with. Is that seem to square with what you've read?
That does square with what I read. Absolutely, you meet them all, and
Yeah.
it becomes clear to everybody who you belong with, is how I take it. Yeah.
Yeah, well, if this whole thing is the spiritual world, that whole state is about becoming, fusing the internal and external. So you really are who you are, and you're not. So I mean, naturally, that would kind of show. Okay, well, now that everybody knows who they are, where's the compatibility? So excellent question, and we'll touch on it more later when it comes up in the text. Okay, our next one we have. This is from Facebook, from Susie. If the people we love are there to greet us, what about those folks we didn't get along with? Will they be there too? They're there. I mean, everybody's there, right? But as I understand it, they wouldn't be there right away. Like, hey, it's me, your enemy. For two reasons, Cara, and see if these hold up to scrutiny. One is near-death experiences and all that. People always talk about meeting their loved ones, and I don't think I've ever heard one where it said, there was my boss that I hated was there to greet me. But then also this, what you're talking about, that affinity, the magnetism you're talking about, right?
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's painted as a very gentle process. So I think, to me, the description is of starting out with loved ones, with the angels with who love people more than anybody. You start there, and you work down to friends that you knew in the world. It sounds to me like he describes friends and loved ones first. If you have business to take care of with other people, you might get there before you get totally sordid.
Yes. So enemies of mine, I'll see you. We can sort out our business. Okay, let's get to our next question. This is from James. In the past, you've referenced mental illness and how that is more likely a spiritual experience. What about meds that have been prescribed because a person has been diagnosed, like myself? Should they even be taken, or does this affect how your body and spirit interact? Thanks very much for that, and thanks for sharing a bit of what's going on for you. I have at one point been on some antidepressant medication, so it's not like I'm looking at it from afar. Mental illness is a complicated thing. Everybody knows that it exists. Well, some people don't. Some people say, "Nah, I just snap out of it." But it seems people know it exists. It's very hard to pin down what's going on. There's a lot of prescription of psychiatric drugs. I think that they can be helpful in certain cases and harmful in other cases. I mean, that's what it's. There are certain people that and I even talked to a guy who worked in in the prison system, who was around schizophrenic people with hearing voices, and really had their lives overrun by this kind of stuff. And sometimes the medications were the only way to get them calm enough that you could do some kind of work to help them out. There are side effects from them, and all that, and they're a temporary solution in that when you stop taking them, generally symptoms return. But there's times in people's lives when that's what they need to get over the hump, and maybe that's a long period, maybe it's a short. So I wouldn't say, nah, man, the meds are no good at all. But I wouldn't say that they're the answer to everything. So that's my unsatisfying answer to this particular one. Chara, do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
I don't have anything to add. I confer. There's a lot of factors: diet, exercise, meds, everything. It's such an individual case.
Yeah, and I would say, that hopefully it's different branches of, spirituality, science, all these things. We have a common goal, which is we want to keep people from misery, and hopefully everybody can be working together. And I've benefited from both, so I guess I'm kind of in both worlds, and I think both have something to offer for sure. So thanks for those questions, you guys. Those are really good, and they'll be keep them coming because we'll have more answers or our best guess at them as we move on through the show. So let's get back to our text here. We arrive in our first state of being, the state in which we focus on our outer self immediately after our death. Everyone has an outer spiritual self and an inner spiritual self. We use the outer aspects of our spirit to adjust our physical person in the world, especially our faces, speeches, and behavior, in order to interact with other people. So he's saying that this is the part of your consciousness, because spirit and consciousness were the same thing for him. He said the body wasn't conscious; it's the spirit. So this outer aspect of your spirit is the thing that you're, when you say, okay, I want to walk, it's the thing that gets you to walk. And I don't know if this is definitely not worth mentioning right now, but I will. Have you ever had this experience, Chara? You probably not, but there's a couple times when I've been walking, and I suddenly think, and I've actually laughed to myself out loud, how am I walking right now? I have no idea of the mechanics. I don't understand. I'm not thinking at all about. There's all these muscle groups that are contracting against each other, and there's all this balancing in your core and all this stuff. But you just feel like you're on autopilot. You're just you sort of send this message walk forward, and it happens. Anyway.
Yeah.
What a waste of time for me. Have you ever had something like that?
Similar things. Just I can't believe my heart's beating.
Right.
Who's in charge of that? All I'm doing is going for a walk.
Oh yeah, I haven't beat that heart in quite some time. So anyway, that to me is the outer aspects of the spirit are managing that, as Swedenborg describes here. So he says that the inner aspects of our spirit, by contrast, belong to our desire to do things and the thoughts we think as a result. They rarely show in our faces, speech, or behavior. We are trained from infancy to present ourselves as a friendly, benevolent, and honest, and to conceal the thoughts that our private intentions give rise to. So we become accustomed to living in a way that is outwardly moral and civil, no matter what we are like inside. As a result of this habitual behavior, we scarcely know our own inner selves, and in any case, pay no attention to them. So he's kind of making this distinction, outer self, inner self, and that the outer self is, what sort of your personality, what you put on, and inner self is more, why am I doing the things I'm doing? What am I meditating on when I'm alone? So is that the way you sort of see this distinction, Chara?
Yeah, the inner self being our motivations, which breed our thoughts, right? It's our heart that drives our thinking. Swedenborg's very clear about that. And the outer self more lesser concerns. I think the way that quote in the text about adjusting our bodies, I was thinking about just minor things like behaving in a socially acceptable way. That kind of outer thing, as opposed to, okay, what am I really after in life? What's driving me today?
Yes, absolutely. Just that the outer self is really a tool used by the inner self. That if I know, okay, I'm going into this meeting and this person that I'm with is an important person in my company, maybe I'll be more friendly to them than I would if they weren't, and that is the inner self manipulating the outer self to try to get something that
Yeah.
it wants. All right, so let's get back to our text here. Our first state of being after death is like our state in this world, since we are then similarly focused on our outer self. We have similar faces, voices, and characters. We lead similar moral and civic lives. This is why it still seems to us as though we were in this world unless we notice things that are out of the ordinary. And remember that angels told us we were spirits when we were awakened. Like, oh yeah, right, the angels. So the one life carries on into the other, and death is only a passage. And as you described, the initial awakening period in the afterlife that Swedenborg writes about is this really, overwhelming, loving experience. And I think this is what people are getting a taste of it in their near-death experiences. But where he talks about, you're gradually you're awakened and you're with the highest angels, and then everybody's doing everything nice for you. But it seems that after that you kind of drop into this sort of normal-ish period where you kind of go back to living sort of similarly because you're in your external spiritual part, which kind of got formed by how we behave in this world. So that's why a topic of another one of our shows was how some people in the afterlife cannot know they've died. In the beginning, I think probably everybody knows, right? Like the angels tell you, hey, you're here. This is the life after death. But the mind can be a stubborn thing, and if we've really set ourselves in a certain way of thinking, we can return to that and just kind of explain away, like, oh, that was indigestion or something like that. That's what caused all those angels and stuff, and there's no afterlife and none of that stuff. If you're just joining us, we're working our way through Swedenborg's Our Life After Death. You can download the PDF in the description of the video, and we're right now on page 61. With us is Chara Daum, translator, or on the translation team of the NCE, which is the New Century Edition. That's the team that translated this book we're reading now. They're taking the last translate. How long ago was Swedenborg's stuff translated before you guys got on the job? Quite a while ago, right?
Well, there's been several versions through the years, but it was over 100 years ago that a bunch of them were translated into forms that have been sticking around for a long time. There have been several passes at Heaven and Hell, but yeah.
Because Heaven and Hell is the money book. Actually, this book, Our Life After Death, is an excerpt of Heaven and Hell. And something that I really like, that I love New Century Edition, which is the one that you're working on, and I'm just saying that with my external self to gain your favor for some reason.
Of course.
But one thing I like, a lot of things that you guys do with it. One thing I like is in the full version you have these little sort of footnotes, by it, because you'll explain, like, oh, this Latin word conscienta or whatever that is that is translated conscience sometime. That I remember this was a note from it that actually conscienza is that, am I pronouncing that right? Conscienza?
Conscientia.
Conscientia. So I was way off. Conscientia. I'm going to name my firstborn Conscientia. Conscientia is this concept that doesn't really have a modern analog, that encompasses both conscience and consciousness. It's sort of a, anyway, reading that note, I just, so I don't quite know what he's talking about. It's great. So I appreciate you're doing good work there. Let's take a look at that work right now. Let's get back to our PDF. Since this is what we are like as spirits immediately after our life in the world, our friends and people we have known in the world then recognize us. And there's your answer. The question, the title was the question, will people in the afterlife recognize us? And I think most people were expecting yes. And answer is yes. And he goes into this interesting little riff here about what it's like. Because what's it like when you meet your friends? Do do you say, okay, let's pull out our phone calendars and like when do you want to hang out? Or is it like, no, I'm an angel now and I have angel things to do. I can't talk to you. Or what is it like? Is it, do you hang out? Like is there like I just got the new Mario Kart, but like do they have the new one that hasn't come out yet? What do you do? Like what do you do with your friends? Is it like, what's it like? He describes it a little bit here, so let's take a look at that. Spirits perceive who we are not only from our faces and voices, and just a reminder that he says in our first state after death, our faces and voices are similar to how they are here, but that gradually they change to more embody who we really are. But also from the aura of our life when they come near. And the other life, whenever we think about someone, we call up that individual's face in our thought, along with many details about her or his life. And when we do this, the other is present as though called to us. That's sort of that magnetism that you're talking about, or a shade of it, you know. Things like this happen in the spiritual world because thoughts are shared there and because space is not what it is in the material world. This is why as soon as we arrive in the other life, we are all recognized by people we have known in one way or another, and why we talk with others and meet with them as we did during our friendship with them in the world. And I just would like to say, going back one sentence, things like this happen in the spiritual world because thoughts are shared there and because space is not what it is in the material world. He kind of just hits you pretty hard with a couple big things there. Thoughts are shared. Have you heard him talk about shared thoughts in the afterlife? And if so, what did he say about it?
He does say some interesting things about the thought of one being the thought of many, or the whole community having a thought, and one person expresses that thought perhaps in a sort of ambassador way. Yeah.
Yes, there's a lot of, and I see where you're going there, because there are simple things that seem easier that would be analogous to like what we're doing here, that you can communicate your thoughts much better because you can speak more eloquently and more quickly, but then also you can kind of create visual representations along with your thoughts. You know, that will, like, so if I'm trying to describe something to you or feelings, there'll be some representation that really gets my point across. But then, as you were saying, it gets weirder. There's like this sort of, the thoughts can be communal. Many people can be participating in the same thought, and as you're saying, one person can kind of be a mouthpiece for the thought of a community, and it gets more and more in depth and out there, which is cool. We like that because it gives us something to think about, and it has, I think, pretty cool potential for human community to get more intimate and more constructive, even that it is here. Okay, so let's get back to our reading. Okay. I have heard many times how people newly arrived from the world rejoiced to see their friends again, and how their friends rejoiced in turn that the others had come to them. It certainly seems like you would. So it sounds like, we're people. We're still people, and oh, you're here. I can't believe you're here. And think about that. So we're all going through life, and we don't know, is there really an afterlife? Is there not? Okay, but we know that we love each other, and we know that we have these bonds of friendships. And think about what that would be to you pass away, and you I'm on there really is a life after death. Wow, things are cool here. This is great. I can't believe it. And then you think about somebody that you knew, and they show up. You're like, I gotta show you this. It seems like a cool sort of dynamic, and I bet that there are a lot of really exciting reunions there. So what we're gonna do, take a little break to do some questions. If you're just joining us, please write down your questions and comments either on YouTube or Facebook, and we'll try to get to them the best that we can. Okay, so our first question is from Mark. Can we expect to meet and talk with Jesus? Does he interact personally with angels and spirits? Great question, and short answer is yes. That Swedenborg does say that Jesus, or God in the human form, talks with people. Is that true, Chara?
I believe that is true.
Yeah, that he says that at times he's seen God walking, around with people. And plus, Swedenborg himself had visions of Jesus. Swedenborg came from the Christian tradition, and so Jesus was a very meaningful thing to him, and so he did have communication with God. And I would say that probably not everybody would see Jesus first thing, especially Swedenborg describes people who were in the other life and were nervous whenever Christians were mentioned or something, because they had been exposed to the Christian church of Swedenborg's day or persecuted by it, and so they thought, oh, that's no good. But they're like the misconceptions are kind of cleared up, and it's like, oh no, this is the love that's behind it, and you kind of see that behind all kinds of faith traditions. So that's a great question, and the answer is, yeah, man, of course we would meet God. Like, why wouldn't we meet? And as Swedenborg puts it, that Jesus is God in a form that we can see and understand. So I would certainly want to, because I mean, you'd think like we'd have a lot to talk about, or at least a few things to talk about. And if we have that reunion with our friends that's so emotional and meaningful, how much more so with God, if we can finally get that channel open. Okay, so thanks. Let's get to our next one. Death for Us from YouTube says, can we talk with friends and partners we've fallen out with in this life and discuss? I still care about these people. I appreciate you sharing that, and that does touch on a little bit of the human race's heartbreak over broken relationships of all kinds, and just sort of that. Yeah, there are people that it gets to a point in life where you just can't talk to people, or there's no communication opened, and the question is, is there a chance to resolve that on the other side? Chara, yes or no?
Yes.
All right. Do you have any other thoughts on that?
Oh, the words are escaping me right now. Over to you, Curtis.
Okay. All right. Great. No, the words are escaping me. Back to that's great. So, I'll just make some words up. I would say we have this sort of inner and outer self that he's talking about, and so the reduction into who we really are. So once we get past, once we get to more of our essential selves, you would think some of the petty issues that we had with each other would be gone. Also that you kind of come into this heavenly mindset, and that you have this new perspective on life and this newfound love. So there too, I think there would be less of this like, oh yeah, I have this history with you, so we can't talk, because angels and spirits are not as wrapped up in history as we are, as in the past. And our mutual friend Jonathan Rose was on this program some time ago, and I don't know if he said it when he was on, but I've heard him say for sure that Swedenborg, in this one obscure place in his writing, says everybody in heaven knows everybody else.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard him say that?
I have heard him say that, yes.
And I trust Jonathan when he says things like that. I don't know why, but so if that's the case, and there's certainly, as you were describing before, there's this sharing of the individual with everyone, and of everyone with the individual. So there's all this connection there, and that would, I would think, include resolutions. And also, Swedenborg, last time we discussed the resolution of crimes in the afterlife, and that somebody who had murdered someone interacted with the person that they had murdered, and so even to that extreme level, there certainly does seem like, it's not just like it won't ever get resolved. So
and what comes to mind too right now is that Swedenborg does talk about, which is common in all kinds of philosophies, about this life review, that every state of our life is with us, is inside us in some way. Not that it's going to be a conscious memory all the time, but it does sound like we look at all of that. And I forget the name of the person who sent this question, but he said he still loves these people. If it gets down to a matter of love, then that is going to provide the magnetism, and there's going to be cleanup. I imagine that heaven is full of the best therapists ever, and that cleanup happens so that we're free and close to each other.
Yeah, I very well said. And if there's not that, then what are they spending all their time doing up there? Like,
exactly.
Being able to develop the techniques to sort out the problems. What are you building, like a giant building or something? Like, what are you doing up there? you know. Okay,
Amen. Amen.
I'm gonna get in trouble for saying that. Okay, with the other side. Oh, so we have one more, I think, or are we out of questions?
No, it's right there.
Okay. All right. So I don't have my visual for the question right now. So we're gonna pause that question, and we're just going to get back to our PDF type text. And if we can't do that, I'm gonna have to go old-fashioned and read it right off of the paper. Cara, are you familiar with paper?
I am. I have it right in front of me.
Okay. All right. So I think we're back in business. But let's are we gonna go to question? Okay, let's take our question. Sorry, we rely on computers and they betray us occasionally. Okay, this is from Vicky1216TN from YouTube. Do you believe that if you commit suicide but ask God to forgive you before you do it, will you go to heaven or hell? It's a great question because suicide is such an intense topic and one that really touches a lot of people's lives. And so the question is, so what are the rules? You know, basically, like, because there are some traditions that say suicide is an automatic ticket to hell. Like if you killed yourself, you know, whatever the rationale is, because of the people you hurt or because you threw God's gift back in His face or whatever, you're going to go to hell. However, that's not the Swedenborg's view of the afterlife, because what you do in any one instance can't determine your future. It's about who you are as a person on this deeper level that we were talking about, right, Cara? So it's not going to be like, okay, I killed myself, but I did this first. Can I go to heaven and hell? Is a choice based on an entire lifetime of choices of what you love, not just one state. As we were talking about mental illness before, many people who take their own lives are just almost don't realize what they're doing. So it's not going to be all about the one act. Do you agree?
I totally agree. As we read earlier tonight about casting off, what does it say, the stain of our material body or something like that?
That's it. That's what you guys translated it as.
Yeah, the team.
Yeah.
To me, that's part of like the chemical imbalances, perhaps, that goes into suicide for some people. I am not an expert. I don't know everything about it, but there seem to be things about our physical body that affect our mind and drive these choices, which may or may not be actual choices in this world. So when we're clear of that physical body, then we'll get down to our loves. And the act of suicide, I agree with Curtis. Choosing heaven or hell is a lifetime of choices. You're choosing toward or against all the time. And so in the other life, you are not only going to go to hell if you choose that's where you want to be. You want to be where people don't care about each other.
Yeah.
Then you'll be there. The one act in this world going out, as horrific as it is not going to make that decision.
No, it may lead to you may find yourself with some baggage on the other side.
Yes.
Swedenborg talked about, if I searched his writings for the word suicide, it only comes up like twice. And one of those is he met somebody in the afterlife, he said, that who had killed himself with a knife, and they were, I guess they had just gotten there and they like couldn't get rid of the knife. You know, or something like it. It's not just like, oh, I killed myself. Well, that's okay. Well, now welcome to heaven. You know, like, obviously, if you're there, you know, it's a pretty heavy action to take, and it's not like the whole world of spirits thing we're talking about here is this process of working through our stuff. You know, so it's not you got to work through that. Everything that brought you to that act, you still got to work through it. So.
Yes, I agree. I don't think suicide is an answer to the difficulties of living in this world. The difficulties will be dealt with. It's the difficulties of the human condition, and that's something we all get a chance to work on.
Absolutely. So I'm glad we got to that last question. We almost didn't, man. I don't know if you guys saw anything on your camera, but it was Google mess over here, man. Okay. So thank you guys so much for the questions. We'll have one more segment of answering. So let's get back to our text here. it often. Oh, this is sort of our third bullet point. The reunition of married partners. Uh, this is the bottom of page 61. It often happens that married partners meet and exchange greetings joyfully. They stay together as well, but for a longer or shorter time, depending on how happily they had lived together in the world. And Cara, that sounds a little bit like what you were describing before, where you find out who you really have a compatibility with.
Yeah. Yep.
Ultimately, unless they have been united by true marriage love, which happens when heavenly love unites two minds, they separate after having been together for a while. So isn't that, Cara, isn't that a little bit like this person's talking about, if you have people that you can no longer see or talk to, doesn't this sound like a little bit of a working out? Because, you get back with all those people and see, what were the root of those problems, and is that something we're going to fix, or is there another path for us, right?
Right. I think, to me, it translates into relationships beyond just marriage. I imagine.
Yeah, I would think so. It's if there's a law that governs that, it's not like the external act of signing a marriage covenant and getting that person that would have a huge spiritual significance. So, all right, so let's get to the last little paragraph there. Oh, and this is what happens if it wasn't so joyful between the two. If the minds of the partners disagreed, however, and if their inner selves were repellent to each other, they break out into open hostility and sometimes actually fight with each other. Still, they are not separated until they enter the second state of being, which will be described shortly. So that doesn't sound like fun, but nothing is allowed unless some good can come out of it, right? So there must be some kind of, okay, these people need to really understand that we're not helping each other. This is not going to work, and that's kind of the final process there. So, it is what it is, and as you're saying, the best therapists and all that, so I'm sure people can get marriage counseling or whatever if they need it, but, ultimately there we can get to the root of things and find out, what's the best thing for everybody, as we move forward. Okay, and don't forget to get your questions in if you haven't already. We'll soon be answering those. All right, so now we want to get this last paragraph is this little sort of description of sort of what do you do with your friends once you get back together. So let's take a look right at it. Since the life of newly arrived spirits is not unlike their life in the world, and since they do not know anything about life after death or about heaven or hell, except what they have learned from the literal meaning of the word and some sermons based on it. So Swedenborg is generally addressing people in the Christian church in Europe, and so he's saying, okay, people sort of learn about things based on what they've heard in church. Once they get over their astonishment at being in a body and enjoying all the senses they had in the world, the body being a spiritual body, and at seeing familiar things around them, they find themselves wanting to know what heaven and hell are like and where they are. So it's an interesting statement. It seems like it's not. Yeah, at first you don't know the geography at all. So wait, is there really heaven and hell? What are they like? Where are they? So their friends tell them about what eternal life is like and take them around to various places and into the company of different people. They go to different cities, to gardens and parks, often to spectacular ones, because things like that appeal to the outer self. Then from time to time they are guided into the thoughts they had during their physical lives about the state of the soul after death and about heaven and hell. This makes them upset that they were so thoroughly ignorant about such matters, and that the church was too. And I guess the Christian church of Swedenborg's day didn't have a lot of doctrine about life after death. I mean, nowadays we are blessed with a lot of people describing their experiences. You hear a lot more about it, but I just think that that's an interesting little interesting description of what happens, because as you pointed out when you were looking at this before, you're not shown around by like an official tour guide of the afterlife. It's your buddies that show you around, right?
Yeah, I just thought that was so cool. Not some professor or a camp counselor or anything, but again, it's because love is the main the thing. You know, love is the main event in the spiritual world, and so that they would use the love of friendship to introduce a newcomer to the whole thing. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and that our friendships weren't for nothing. You know, that
Yeah.
they continue to be useful and bring things to us in the next life, and that affinity we have. So whoever's pulling the strings, it knows like, okay, they like these people, so that let's have them all go together, and that's going to be a great way to, that's going to be the most comfortable way for them to start to begin this larger process that's continued in the text. So now we have a couple more questions that we're going to get to here as we get ready to wrap up. We'll go to this one first from Jim Smith on YouTube. If after death you stay with one ex-husband but not the other, will the other one have hurt feelings? I wouldn't think so, because I don't. So yeah, here in this world we have a lot of psychological conditions that make us suffer. One of those is unrequited love. I don't see that as happening on the other side because, first of all, the way that Swedenborg describes it, everybody's got someone who's just right for them, and that's the deepest connection that they could have. And so it's not like, oh, this person would be great for me, but they want somebody else. That it's not. Here we can kind of have that perception, but there you see things as they really are, so you don't kind of get that feeling. And there's just such a friendliness there. I think of like people who have gone through a divorce, but some of them have a post-divorce friendship, or they can like be amiable toward each other. Those are some of my initial thoughts. Cara, did you have anything to add or subtract from that?
I think I agree with what you say. I dare say the process might take a while to become clear, but I think that the end result will be that everyone's with who they belong with, and everyone will be happy.
Yeah, right. It's the things. Yeah, it doesn't move at movie speed there. I
Right.
saw this article that one of the harmful effects of movies is that it shows people going through emotional phases way too quickly. So like,
Yes.
oh right, like, and I see that sometimes, like, oh, like you just had this scene where everyone was almost killed, and now you're kind of like, oh, I think I'm falling for this person. Like there's just this way too quick progression. So there it would be too. But yeah, that. And also, it comes back to the idea of divine providence, that God doesn't love anybody less than someone else, and He knows that having a good romantic situation can have a huge impact on happiness. So He's not out to, screw some people over and give other people a really great life. So that doesn't seem to square with a divine guidance of things. So let's get to our next question, which is from Stretchaholic on YouTube. Swedenborg says we interact with other entities from other worlds. Do we in spirit form see them if they're also like-minded, and would we see them as human of how they are? As a human of how they are? Yes. That's a good question. So I would start by saying I have talked to and online talked to a lot of people who say that they encounter spirits. They can see people who have passed on, interact with them. It seems to be a relatively common thing with a lot of people in the world. And then as far as would we be able to see them based on our affinity, I feel like some people do, some people don't, because I think about the people who you love who have died, and some people get these like really vivid dreams about them, and some people get these visitations, and other people don't get anything, and they're like, why didn't this happen to me? What's the holdup? So I don't know what sort of the mechanism that opens or closes that connection, but I do know Swedenborg talked briefly about that when we're deep in thought, or the material concerns of our lives have kind of faded away, we can actually appear in our spiritual communities, so they could actually see us briefly, but maybe not converse and all that. And I'll tack one final thing on here is that the spiritual reality is full of representations, or full of imagery. So how someone, because Swedenborg will, and Carl, you must have come across a lot, is that he'll say like, I saw like a horse with a something something, and when I got closer, it was because there was people who were. So he'll see sort of these representations that symbolize people. So you might not always see a human form initially when. Do you know what I'm talking about? Does that make sense?
I do. For instance, a horse has something to do with how people understand the word. So he would say that somehow he was seeing horses, but then he realized that it's because people were arguing about how their understanding of the word, something like that.
Yeah, that you kind of are seeing these correspondences or these representations of these deeper. So all I'm saying is, you could even be being affected by some kind of person on the other side, but get some non-human imagery. In conclusion, as to quote Chara, I'm not an expert in this. Okay, so let's get to the next question. Thanks very much for that one. So this is from YouTube, Sister Love Show. What about pets? Souls, spirits, meet again in afterlife? I say yes. And I feel like it would have to be. I mean, Swedenborg doesn't talk much about pets. That there wasn't. I don't even think that back in the day when he was writing 17 something something, there wasn't even really the same kind of pet culture that there is of people like having pets and loving them. I remember looking up this thing about dogs, and it was sort of like showing kind of a timeline of when the first things were posted saying, I'd actually like my dog back that I lost, but it didn't come till later, that there wasn't kind of this affinity for them that we have now. But I do know that near-death experiences have reported pets, and plus a lot of people would be lonely. So those are a couple thoughts. Do you have an authoritative answer on it, Chara?
I'm afraid I don't. I'm not a pet person, so I can't speak from experience or what Swedenborg says.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking that how before we were talking about sorting out our issues, and I think so. I'll have to sit down with my dog, and he's going to yell at me for some things, and I'm going to try to explain to him about the couch and why that's important to not chew. So that's going to be pretty good for both of us. I need those therapists. Okay. So thanks for the question. Let's. My end answer is, God doesn't want to break people's hearts. He wants people to be together and happy. So there's so much love going around from people to their animals. What does God gain from people being sad? So I would think there's going to be something. We're going to connect. Whatever essence was behind that animal has got to be there somewhere. So who knows? Okay, great. Thank you. Let's get to our next one here. Mark, YouTube. Is it okay to enjoy the physical delights of drugs, sex, and partying, etc. when young, but then clean up your life as you grow older and get to enjoy heaven as well? In some ways, yeah, because then you win. You totally win. You won the beginning, and then you win the end. I would say that the youth is a time when everybody's impulsive, and people are certainly. Chara, didn't Swedenborg, a lot of his process to get to where he was kind of coming to terms with his own personal flaws and kind of learning to separate them, and that happened for him in his 50s or something, right?
That's when his whole spiritual journey began, yeah.
And you remember, did his Journal of Dreams, the Black Dog? Are you familiar with that?
Oh, I don't know about the Black Dog.
Okay, so I read his journal. Swedenborg was one of the back when it wasn't hip to do so. He kept a dream journal, where and this was sort of his spiritual experiences, I believe, began with dreams. Like it was vivid dreams, but then it became these visions. There was this black dog that kept appearing in his, and he learned that the symbolism of that was his pride, because he was a hot shot, like he was good at a lot of stuff, and he thought he was good at a lot of stuff, and that he had to overcome that. And anyway, I just use that as pride is one thing you can have in your youth. There can be nothing is non-recoverable from, there's nothing that, oh, you did that, you can never, you got to try to, all you got to do is try, and you'll be able to turn yourself. If you're if you are there and you're like, okay, well, I'm just going to intentionally do all this stuff and then get better later, I think it's going to be hard to get out of those cycles because whatever you do intentionally stays with you. But I see chance at turning your life around. Does that seem like a fair assessment?
To me, it does. Yes, it's about motivations, and you can always change, ask for help. Uh, yeah.
Yeah, and what about Christmas Carol, Ebenezer Scrooge?
Ebenezer Scrooge, he
I
certainly changed
when
his tune.
when
Yeah.
I think of Christmas Carol, I think of Muppet Christmas Carol. Okay, so we're getting to the end of our show time, and I'm obviously losing my mind. So we got so many good questions, but let's just get to a couple more here. Um, uh, so this is from Marsha on YouTube. Do we grieve our bodies, especially if it was a violent exit, or if we were in peak physical condition, like a top sports car? Like I bought my gym membership, I put in all the time and effort, and I hit my goals, and now I don't get to use the thing. Um, all near-death experiences that I've come across say that people are actually surprised how unattached they feel to their bodies. Have you come across anything like that?
Mm. Yeah, I'm not so much. I think what comes to mind is that Swedenborg talks about how we all in heaven we all return to a state of youth and vitality, so that if you're in heaven, Marcia, you're going to have that body.
Yeah, like you're giving up your sports car for a better sports car.
Yeah, right.
Um, it doesn't pollute. Okay, excellent. Let's get to another one. Uh, this is from Kate on Facebook. Watching and listening to your videos brings back for me memories of my NDE. I remember my friend who passed away being with me. She did not have a body or form, but in my mind or consciousness, I knew it was her. We spent some time together, then she said to me it was time for her to leave. I asked if I could leave with her, and she said no, because it wasn't my time to leave. I remember asking why, and she said because you're not prepared or ready to leave. So I really appreciate that. I love to hear people's experiences because it makes it real, to hear this is a real person who's experienced that and just the emotion that goes with it all, and that's a sweet story, and I appreciate very much you sharing it with us. And if you're watching in post, you can leave your own questions and we'll try to get to them afterwards, but that's going to be our questions for today. All right, so to wrap up, we've been kind of cognitive, this whole time. We've been talking and we've been discussing ideas, but let's get a little into the emotional side of things. This is a segment we do every week. Correspondences is what it's called, and Swedenborg had this idea of correspondences, which is essentially that physical objects represent spiritual realities, and that by looking at the physical world, we can sort of see an image and gain insight into deeper sort of spiritual things inside us and in the afterlife and all this. So today I want to look at mountains, and that Swedenborg says mountains are a symbol, two things that I found, of love and of heaven, and that this is why a lot of ancient people would go on top of a mountain to have their worship, because there's a symbolism. You can kind of think of it that if the sun is a symbol for God, or you think high or heaven, then the mountain is a way we can approach up there. So we're going to look at a few pictures of mountains here. It's just going to be like 40 seconds. And how you play the game is picture this reality of love and this approaching to heaven and this mindset while you're looking at the pictures of the mountains, and you can get sort of like a deeper image of what this love really looks like and what it is, and gain some insight and nuance. So we're going to take a look now and just see what comes to you. I just like how at the end there, having the snow-capped, really intense mountains. It's like, wow, they can go so high. There can be such a depth of love, or height, which could be the same thing. Chara, thank you so much for being on the show today. It's been a pleasure discussing things with you. If you want to buy Chara's book, buy any of Swedenborg's books. Or actually, you can probably get them. A lot of I think all of the translating that you guys have done is available for free as downloads online, because that's what the foundation is trying to do. Just get stuff out there. Speaking of that, if you want to support the Swedenborg Foundation, this show, its translations efforts, all that stuff, and reach more people with these ideas and thoughts, you can make a donation. There's a link in the description of this video, and if you make a donation through PayPal, it'll get matched 5 to 1. So even $5 can go a long way. So thanks for considering that, and thank you very much for watching. It's been awesome. Your questions and comments really make this fun to do, and I really appreciate it. Chara, thanks so much for coming. I hope you had a good time. Would you say that you did?
I would. Thanks a lot, Curtis.
Yeah, awesome. Hopefully we can have you back sometime in the
Great.
near future. And all of you watching, we want to have you back next week. We'll be broadcasting again, and we hope you can be a part of it. Thanks for watching.